Nikki? I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you!
Sometimes the most terrifying horror stories don't start with monsters, demons, or haunted houses. Sometimes they begin with something much simpler. A feeling most people have experienced at least once in their lives. The desperate wish for someone to love you back, and that exact idea sits at the heart of Blumhouse's upcoming supernatural horror film Obsession. But here's the twist. Instead of asking what happens when love is rejected, this movie asks a much darker question. What happens when your wish actually comes true? When I first watched the trailer for Obsession, it immediately gave me that unsettling feeling that something was deeply wrong beneath the surface. On paper, the story sounds almost innocent. A shy teenager named Bear has a crush on a girl named Nikki. He likes her a lot, the kind of crush that keeps you awake at night wondering if the other person feels the same way. But the problem is that Bear doesn't have the courage to say it. Bear is played by Johnston, who many viewers might recognize from Teen Wolf. His character is awkward, hopeful, and painfully relatable. He's the kind of guy who rehearses what he wants to say 100 times before actually speaking, and Nikki, played by Inde Navarrette from Superman and Lois, seems like someone who could easily change his entire world. The story begins in a way that almost feels like a romantic comedy. Bear finds himself in a moment where he could finally confess how he feels. Nikki even gives him the opportunity, but instead of taking the chance, he freezes. The moment slips away, and the rejection hits harder than he expected. Now here's where the story takes its first dark turn. While wandering through a store, Bear discovers something strange. A small object called One Wish Willow. At first, it looks harmless, almost like a novelty item. But the instructions promise something dangerous. Make a wish, break the branch, and your wish will come true. Now, if you're like me, you probably already know that nothing good ever comes from supernatural wishes in horror movies. But Bear doesn't see it that way. In that moment of desperation, he makes a wish that feels innocent enough. He wishes that Nikki would love him more than anything else in the world, and somehow, impossibly, the wish works. Suddenly, Nikki begins acting completely differently. She confesses her love to Bear almost immediately. At first, it feels like everything he ever wanted has finally happened, but then the cracks start appearing. There's a moment in the trailer that perfectly captures the tone of the film. Nikki looks directly at Bear and says something that should sound romantic. Instead, it feels deeply disturbing. She tells him she loves him more than anything. Over and over again. The way she says it isn't sweet. It's unsettling, and that's when the audience realizes something Bear hasn't figured out yet. This isn't love, it's obsession. The transformation in Nikki's behavior becomes increasingly extreme. At first, she simply wants to spend every moment with Bear. Then she starts waiting for him constantly. If he leaves the room, she doesn't move. She just sits there, waiting for him to return. If he tries to spend time with friends, she becomes angry. If he wants space, she refuses to give it, and suddenly the dream relationship Bear wished for begins turning into something terrifying. Now here's something I find fascinating about this film. Instead of immediately turning the story into a gore-filled horror movie, Obsession slowly builds tension through psychological discomfort. The horror comes from watching a relationship spiral into something unnatural, and Inde Navarrette's performance seems to be a huge part of why the film works. From what we've seen so far, she moves between two completely different versions of Nikki. One moment she appears sweet, almost overly affectionate. The next moment, there's something cold and frightening behind her eyes. Her delivery shifts from innocent admiration to something that feels disturbingly possessive. That duality is where the film finds most of its power, and honestly, I'm curious about something here. If someone loved you this intensely, would it feel romantic or terrifying? Because that's the exact emotional line this film seems to explore. Johnston also brings an interesting energy to Bear. At first, he's thrilled. The girl he wanted finally loves him back. But as Nikki's behavior grows more extreme, his excitement slowly turns into confusion and eventually fear, because the version of Nikki standing in front of him is no longer the person he originally liked. That realization becomes one of the film's most disturbing ideas. The real Nikki is still there, somewhere inside, but she's trapped. The trailer even hints at moments where Nikki seems to fight against whatever supernatural force is controlling her behavior. Those scenes add an extra layer of tragedy to the story. This isn't just a horror movie about an obsessive girlfriend, it's a horror movie about someone losing control of their own identity, and if you think about it for a second, that's actually far more disturbing. Director Curry Barker makes his feature film debut with Obsession, and it's already generating serious attention. Before this project, Barker built a reputation on YouTube creating short horror and comedy films, including the viral Project Milk and Serial. What makes this transition interesting is how naturally Barker blends different tones. The film begins almost like a quirky romantic story, then it slowly mutates into psychological horror. Eventually, it becomes something much darker, and from early reactions, that tonal shift seems to be one of the film's biggest strengths. Obsession premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival last September, and the response has been surprisingly strong. Critics have praised the film's originality and its ability to mix uncomfortable horror with moments of dark humor. At the moment, the film is sitting at an impressive score on Rotten Tomatoes, which is especially rare for horror movies, and honestly, Blumhouse probably knew they had something special here, because the central idea taps into something universal everyone has experienced: rejection. Everyone has wondered what life would be like if their crush suddenly loved them back, but Obsession takes that fantasy and twists it into a nightmare. There's also a deeper theme running underneath the story. The film quietly examines expectations people sometimes place on relationships. What does it mean to truly love someone? And what happens when affection is forced rather than freely given? That question echoes throughout the entire movie. In fact, the story even references a famous lyric from Bonnie Raitt's song that says, "You can't make someone love you if they don't." Obsession basically asks what happens if you try anyway, and the answer is horrifying. As the film moves toward its final act, the tone reportedly becomes much darker. The tension escalates toward a disturbing conclusion where Bear realizes that fixing the situation might be far more difficult than making the wish in the first place, because the One Wish Willow doesn't appear to offer refunds. In one chilling moment from the trailer, Bear tries to undo his wish by calling the mysterious company behind the object. The response he receives is simple: they can't cancel it. And when he asks if Nikki will stay like this forever, the voice on the other end gives a chilling answer. Yes, as long as you're alive. That line alone might be one of the creepiest moments in the entire trailer, because it suggests that Bear's life has now become permanently tied to a love he never truly wanted, and that's where the real horror begins. Obsession may start like a story about getting everything you ever wished for, but by the end, it becomes a warning about the consequences of trying to control someone else's feelings, and honestly, that idea alone makes this one of the more intriguing horror concepts I've seen recently. Now I want to hear your thoughts. If you had the chance to make someone fall in love with you instantly, would you actually take it? Or would you leave things the way they are? Because after watching this trailer, I'm starting to think some wishes are better left unmade. Obsession is scheduled to arrive in theaters on May 15th, 2026. And if the early reactions are anything to go by, this could end up being one of the most unusual horror films of the year. And if you enjoy breaking down new movie trailers and discovering the hidden themes behind them, make sure you stay tuned, because there are always more stories worth exploring.